Well, we negotiated two side agreements that protect labor and protect the environment. And not until the two side agreements were completed did we agree to support NAFTA. Now, this is a good deal for our country, Larry, and let me explain why.
But you were hedging early.
Well, we said from the very beginning that we wanted to improve the basic arrangement, which we did with these side agreements. And the reason why this is so important can be illustrated by the story of a good friend of mine that I grew up with named Gordon Thompson, who lives in Elmwood, Tennessee, with his wife Sue and his son Randy. He makes tires for a living. He's a member of the United Rubber Workers, and he's for this because he's taken the time to look at how it affects his job and his family. We make the best tires in the world, but we have a hard time selling them in Mexico because they have a 20% tax collected at the border on all of the tires that we try to sell. Now, when they make tires and sell them into the United States, the tax at the border is zero. So it's a one-way street. NAFTA changes that. It makes it even Steven.
So he'll make more tires.
Well, his job will be more secure. They'll make more tires. They'll be able to sell more tires. His son will have a better chance of going into that line of work if that's what he should decide he wants to do.
Wait, well, let's go back to this a second. Did Al Gore just say that we make the best tires in the world?
We make the best tires in the world.
I'm getting confused here. Didn't Al Gore also say that it was his friend, Gordon, who worked for the United Rubber Workers, who was involved in this making of the best tires in the world, not we? We as in Al Gore and everyone else who is watching him.
He's a member of the United Rubber Workers.
If it is members of the United Rubber Workers who are making the best tires in the world, why did Al Gore say that we make the best tires in the world? Clearly we do not make any tires. 99.9% of the people watching him have absolutely nothing to do with the manufacture of tires. If we simply take "we make the best tires in the world" at face value, he's simply saying that the tires made in the USA are the best in the world. After all, it's common vernacular for people to refer to things happening in their country or city or state as we, such as "we have the best military in the world," or in New York City, where I am, I can say "we have the largest subway system in the world." Or when a sports team wins, people will go on "we won," even though they personally are not involved in it. Is he using the words "we" as to identify himself with the individual viewer and "best," a pretty positive term, together in a sentence that really has no inherent logic to it, for the purpose of implanting deep within the viewer's subconscious mind an association with them and Al Gore as equating the best, as meaning that if they listen to Al Gore and they go along with Al Gore, then they are the best. If they associate their ego with Al Gore and lower their critical capacity, they are therefore the best. Al Gore is playing a mind game on people.
What changed?
Well, we negotiated two side agreements that protect labor and protect the environment. And not until the two side agreements were completed did we agree to support NAFTA. Now, this is a good deal for our country.
If we take that last passage at face value, it seems that Al Gore and Bill Clinton had some concerns about NAFTA, which caused them to renegotiate certain aspects of it. However, Al Gore is really implanting directly into people's subconscious minds 4 suggestions. Those suggestions are that NAFTA will protect the environment, protect labor, that him and Bill Clinton actually went through some review process and therefore they made it okay so you don't have to worry about it, and lastly that NAFTA is a good deal for the country.
Side agreements that protect labor and protect the environment. And not until the two side agreements were completed did we agree to support NAFTA. Now, this is a good deal for our country, Larry, and let me explain why.
But you were hedging early.
Maybe you think I'm grasping at straws. I mean, anyone could just read into anyone's speech and look for hidden hypnotic suggestions. But there's one part of Al Gore's talk that I found very odd.
A good friend of mine that I grew up with named Gordon Thompson, who lives in Elmwood, Tennessee, with his wife Sue and his son Randy.
Why is Al Gore mechanically reciting information about some guy he supposedly went to school with many years ago?
A good friend of mine that I grew up with named Gordon Thompson, who lives in Elmwood, Tennessee, with his wife Sue and his son Randy.
Al Gore does not use logic or reason to argue for NAFTA. Instead, he talks about this family he knows in Tennessee, and he builds an association between first himself and the family, then an association between that family and NAFTA. There's an implication that if you are against NAFTA now, you are somehow against this family, and because there's association between Al Gore and the family, you oppose Al Gore, you therefore oppose the family. This is a deep psychological game. It's an appeal to primitive emotions and really does not belong in politics, especially wouldn't be in politics if we had it online in public.
Now this is a good deal for our country. Now this is a good deal for our country. Now this is a good deal for our country. Now this is a good deal for our country. Now this is a good deal for our country.
After many years of having U.S. companies in Mexico, this is the way Mexican workers live all around big new U.S. plants. Livestock in this country and animals have a better life than good, decent, hardworking Mexicans working for major U.S. companies. And here's one just to look at. Here's a good, decent man working his heart out, making his cardboard shack, and the cardboard came from boxes that were used to ship the goods down there.
Can I say something about
this? I didn't interrupt you.
Okay, now, guys.
Now maybe it just...
Is this... now, your concept would have been what, Ross? If this was a
all
bad
I'm saying
deal, what would
is if after 10 active years, this has been in effect since the 60s, but let's say 10 active years, you would think the standard of living of the Mexican worker would begin to come up. Instead, it continues to go down by design. 36 families own over half the country.
So
85 million people work for them in poverty. U.S. companies, because it is so difficult to do business in this country, can't wait to get out of this country and go somewhere else, and, if possible, get labor that costs 1/7 of what it costs in the United States.
How would you change it? How would you change it?
Very simply, I would go back and study. First, we should look at this. It doesn't work.
Well, what specific changes would you make in it?
I can't, unless you let me finish, I can't answer your question. Now, you asked me, and I'm trying to tell you.
All right. Well, you brought your charts tonight, so I want to know what specific changes you would like to make in the treaty.
Al Gore doesn't seem very nice. He resorts to interrupting, bullying, and even mocking Perot, rather than letting this be a discussion about ideas and logic.
The European community has had a similar experience. They got to Spain, Portugal, countries like that, where the wages were different, people didn't have rights, so on and so forth, and they made them come up the economic scale. In 1904, Theodore Roosevelt wrote a beautiful, simple statement. And basically, he said something very similar to what Congressman Gephardt recently said. He said, under no circumstances can we lower the standard of living of the working American. Therefore, any trade agreement we enter into must require a social tariff, I would say, that makes it an even playing field, then gives Mexico an incentive to raise the standard of living of its people, which it does not have now.
Okay, can I respond now?
The standard of living of
okay.
people.
Now, so your basic response is you would change it by raising tariffs.
I just started, but you interrupted.
On
That's
Mexico.
The first thing I would do.
One.
It's the
Right.
first thing I would do.
Okay, now, I've heard Mr. Perot say,
if Al Gore really wanted to hear some specifics, then why was he so quick to interrupt Perot as soon as Perot began to get into some of the nuances of international trade, and especially before Perot would actually discuss some better alternatives than that idiotic NAFTA treaty? Also notice that Al Gore brings things to a very simple, free trade good, tariffs bad position.
side agreements that protect labor and protect the environment. And not until the two side agreements were completed did we agree to support NAFTA. Now, this is a good deal for our country, Larry. A good friend of mine that I grew up with named Gordon Thompson, who lives in Elmwood, Tennessee, with his wife Sue and his son Randy. What specific changes would you make in it?
I can't unless you let me finish. I can't answer your question. Now, you asked me, and I'm trying to tell
All right.
you.
Well, you brought your charts